His words hung in the air, a blade sharpened by 5 years of silence and pain. They're mine, aren't they? The hospital corridor, once filled with the chaotic symphony of my children's laughter, fell deathly quiet. The only sound was the frantic, panicked drumming of my own heart against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage of bone. In that single, suspended moment, my entire world, a universe I had painstakingly built on a foundation of love and secrecy, began to fracture. The carefully constructed walls were crumbling, and the truth, raw and blinding, was about to spill out. My life as I knew it was a secret, a beautiful, chaotic, and utterly devastating secret embodied by 4 tiny human beings. They were my whirlwinds, my tempests in teacups, for little souls who carried the unyielding stubbornness of my own spirit, and the chilling, magnetic intensity of the man I had worshipped in the shadows of my heart. They were my little tulips, a name I'd whispered to them in the dead of night when exhaustion threatened to swallow me whole. Because no matter how violent the storm in my soul, no matter how fractured and depleted I felt, one look at their faces and something inside me would bloom, defiant and vibrant against the odds. Min-Jun, my firstborn by a matter of minutes, was a miniature general, conducting the symphony of our lives with a plastic whistle and a frown of comical seriousness. Then came Kai, the little rogue with eyes that danced with mischief. If a cookie vanished from the jar, his guilt was written in the crumbs around his triumphant smile. Hyun, my gentle soul, was a creature of soft touches and softer words. His small hand was a constant anchor on the hem of my shirt, his whispered pleas for one more story a melody that could soothe my most ragged edges. And finally, there was Hannah, my only daughter, my wildflower. She was a hurricane of fierce independence, sassy remarks, and an intelligence that often left me breathless and terrified. They were 5 years old now. 5 years of scraped knees, bedtime stories, monster slang, and a love so fierce it felt like it could both shatter my bones and hold them together. They were the sun, moon, and stars of my small universe. But they were also the echo of a man who had no idea his legacy was alive and breathing in my tiny, chaotic apartment. A man whose name was a ghost on my lips, Julian Kong. Julian, the man I had fallen for with the reckless abandon of youth, long before I understood the brutal complexities of want and desire. He was a titan, a CEO whose arctic gaze could silence a room of powerful men, but whose impossibly rare smile could dismantle every defense I had ever erected. To him, I was nothing more than a passing curiosity, an insignificant employee he might have glanced at once in a hallway. He was blissfully unaware that in his periphery, I was silently, completely, and irrevocably coming undone. I wanted him, craved him. I needed him with an ache that felt primal, a hunger that gnawed at the very core of my being. And so I had begged. In a moment of sheer, unadulterated madness, I had pleaded for a single night. Just one. I needed to know what it felt like to be seen by him, to be touched by him, to be wanted, even if it was just for a few fleeting hours. He had granted my wish. The night was a maelstrom of desperation and heat, a collision of fire and ice that I was certain I would not survive. He had given himself to me in a way that seared itself into my memory, a brand upon my soul. And in the aftermath, the universe, in its infinite and cruel wisdom, had delivered its judgment. It gave me not one, but 4 living, breathing consequences of that single stolen night. I swear I tried to tell him. The words were a constant, frantic prayer in my mind. The day of the accident, they were a stone in my throat. I stood across the street from his gleaming corporate tower, the glass and steel reflecting my own terrified face. Julian, there's something you need to know. My palms were slick with sweat, my throat a desert. I was about to cross the street, to force the words from my lips, to change our lives forever. And then the world stopped. The news broke like a sonic boom, shattering the morning calm.
À catastrophique car accident.
Julian's vehicle, a twisted wreck of metal. His body, barely extricated from the carnage. The doctor's words were clinical, brutal. His legs were crushed beyond repair. The indomitable Julian Kong, the man who strode through life as if he owned the very ground beneath his feet, would never walk again. I remember running to the hospital, my heart a wild, panicked drum solo against my ribs. I thought I would collapse before I ever reached his room. But when I finally did, a wall of ice met me. He refused to see me. He refused to see anyone. The nurses spoke in hushed tones of his rage, his bitterness, the profound and broken despair of a man who had lost everything. When I tried to push my way past his door, his glare was a physical blow, a volley of daggers that pinned me to the spot. Leave, he had snarled, his voice a venomous rasp. I don't want your pity. And so I left. I turned my back and walked away, carrying my monumental secret in the hollow space where my heart used to be. Carried it alone. Now, 5 years later, destiny, with its penchant for cruel irony, had decided to play its hand. It happened in the fluorescent-lit, antiseptic-smelling corridors of a hospital. I was there for the Tulip's annual checkup, an event that always resembled a miniature circus. Minjun was charging ahead, his toy stethoscope swinging, diagnosing startled patients with imaginary ailments. Kai and Hannah were a giggling pair of spies, peeking into every room they passed. And Hyun, my sweet Hyun, clung to my leg, his voice a tiny whisper. "Daddy, is it going to hurt?" he asked for the 10th time. And then I saw him. As if summoned by a wicked twist of fate, he was there. Julian Kong. He was in a wheelchair, yet he still commanded the space around him. The tailored suit was immaculate, his aura still crackling with an authority that had not been diminished by his circumstances. But his eyes were different. They were tired, shadowed, and held a hollowness that seemed to echo the years of pain he had endured. For a heartbeat I was paralyzed. Every instinct screamed at me to gather my children and flee, to dissolve into the bustling crowd and disappear before he could see me. But fate, it seemed, had a flair for the dramatic. Before I could move a muscle, Minjun, my fearless little general, marched directly up to Julian's wheelchair. He raised his toy stethoscope with the gravity of a seasoned physician and announced in a loud, clear voice, "Sir, I must perform a cardiac examination." Julian blinked, utterly taken aback. It was clear he was not accustomed to being addressed with such audacious familiarity. "A what?" he asked, his voice rough. "Your heart?" Minjun repeated, with an air of immense patience. Without a shred of hesitation, he clambered onto the armrest of Julian's wheelchair. "I am a doctor. I will ascertain its condition." Kai followed suit, poking at Julian's wrist with a serious expression. "Checking your pulse," he declared. Hannah, not to be outdone, opened her glittery pink purse and produced a toy thermometer. "Open up and say, mister." And then Hyun, my timid boy, summoned a wellspring of courage. He stepped forward and gently placed his tiny plastic first aid kit on Julian's lap. I can give you a bandage if you are broken, he whispered. Time seemed to bend and warp around us. Because in that moment, for the first time in 5 long, agonizing years, I saw something flicker across Julian's face. Something I thought had been extinguished forever. A smile. It was a ghost of a thing, hesitant and fragile, tinged with disbelief. But it was there. The corner of his mouth lifted. The harsh lines around his eyes softened. And for one breathtaking second, he looked less like a fallen titan and more like a man. He looked alive. And then his gaze lifted. It moved past the children and found me. His eyes widened. A storm of shock, confusion, and dawning recognition brewing in their depths. Leo Park, he breathed, and my name on his tongue was a heavy, sharp thing. A memory brought violently to life. My chest constricted, the air stolen from my lungs. Julian. The children looked back and forth between us, their 4 pairs of eyes wide with curiosity. Minjun frowned, his tiny brow furrowed. Daddy, how do you know the sad man in the chair? My blood turned to ice water in my veins. My secret, the fragile thing I had guarded with every fiber of my being, was cracking wide open, spilling its contents onto the cold, sterile floor for the world to see. Julian's gaze darted from my face to the children, then back again. His jaw clenched, a muscle ticking violently. And I knew in the deepest, most terrified part of my soul that he saw it. He saw the impossible truth staring back at him. He saw the sharp, intelligent glint in Kai's eyes that was a perfect mirror of his own. He saw the ghost of his own infuriating smirk on Hannah's lips. He saw the way Minjun carried himself with the unshakable confidence of a born leader. He saw his own pensive frown on Hyun's gentle face. He knew. Hannah tilted her head, tugging on my hand, her voice innocently piercing the suffocating silence. Daddy, why does the mister look like us? My heart stopped beating. Julian's voice was a low, dangerous rumble, each word a stone dropping into the terrifying quiet. They're mine, aren't they? And just like that, the world I had built fell away. The silence that followed Julian's question was a living entity. It was thick, suffocating, pressing in on us from all sides, trapping us in the sterile white corridor with the unbearable weight of our shared history. His words, they're mine, aren't they, were claws raking down the inside of my chest. My 4 little tulips, my entire world, were now staring up at me. Their faces a mixture of confusion and curiosity, waiting for an answer I had never prepared myself to give. My mouth was dry, a desert of unspoken truths. Every rational part of my brain screamed at me to lie, to laugh it off, to conjure some plausible explanation and run. But my heart, that traitorous, trembling organ, knew the era of deception was over. Yes, I whispered. The word was a cracked and broken thing, barely audible, but it echoed in the silence like a gunshot. Minjun gasped with theatrical flair, slapping a hand over his mouth as if he just witnessed the grand reveal in his favorite cartoon. Kai, ever the observer, simply tilted his head, a strange, knowing little smirk playing on his lips. Hannah nodded sagely, as if this development was the most logical thing in the world. And Hyun, my sweet, sensitive Hyun, tugged on my sleeve, his voice a tiny, worried whisper. Daddy, are we in trouble? I felt a desperate urge for the floor to open up and swallow me whole. Julian's eyes were burning holes in me, a maelstrom of emotions I couldn't begin to decipher. His hands, gripping the arms of his wheelchair, were trembling, the knuckles white. For one terrifying, heart-stopping moment. I thought he would erupt, that his anger would explode and shatter what little composure we all had left. Instead, his voice came out low and guttural, laced with a pain that was far more terrifying than rage. 5 years, Leo. You didn't tell me for 5 years? I swallowed against the lump in my throat. I tried, Julian. God, I really did. But after the accident, you don't, he snapped, the word cracking like a whip. The quadruplets flinched, falling silent in an instant. Even Hannah, my fearless warrior, clutched my hand tighter, her bravado vanishing. Julian's chest rose and fell in ragged, uneven breaths. Do you have any idea what you've done? You stole 5 years from me. 5 years of their first words, their first steps. 5 years of them calling someone else Daddy. 5 years of... His voice broke, just for a fraction of a second, before he wrestled it back under control, twisting it into something hard and unforgiving. 5 years I can never, ever get back. The accusation in his voice was a physical weight, crushing me. Guilt, acrid and poisonous, flooded my system. Julian, I stepped toward him, my hands held up in a useless gesture of peace. I didn't mean to. He tore his gaze from me and looked at the children again. As he watched them, something in his expression shifted. The anger was still there, a raging fire. The pain was a raw, open wound. But beneath it all, I saw a flicker of something else, something fragile and achingly vulnerable. It was longing. Minjun, completely oblivious to the monumental tension in the air, chose that moment to once again place his toy stethoscope against Julian's chest. Mr. Daddy's heart is beating very, very fast, he announced with immense pride. Kai let out a snort of laughter. Of course it is. He's angry. Don't be angry at Daddy, Hannah scolded, wagging a tiny finger at Julian. He tries his best. He takes care of us all by himself. He even makes us his awful pancakes just because we ask for them. I groaned. Hey, my pancakes are not awful. They are... Daddy, Hyun said softly, peeking out from behind my leg. But we eat them anyway. For the first time since this catastrophic reunion began, I saw the corner of Julian's mouth twitch. It wasn't a smile, not even close, but it was something. A crack in the icy facade. My heart stuttered in my chest. Later that evening, after the checkups were finally over, I found myself on the hospital's rooftop garden. The children were safe at home with my friend, Sarah, my lifeline in moments of crisis. I needed air. I needed to think, to process the cataclysmic shift in my reality. But fate, it seemed, wasn't finished with me yet. The quiet whir of wheels on stone tiles broke the silence. I turned. It was Julian. He was alone, his suit jacket slung over the back of his chair, his hair disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it in frustration. Leo Park. His voice was low, stripped of its earlier venom, but still carrying a dangerous edge. I braced myself. Julian. He didn't speak for a long time. His gaze was fixed on the sprawling city skyline below, a tapestry of glittering lights. Finally he spoke, his voice tight. Why me? The question caught me completely off guard. What are you talking about? He turned his head slowly, and his gaze was so intense it felt like it could see straight through to my soul. That night. Why did you choose me? Of all the men in the world, why me? Was it some kind of game? Pity? Or did you just want the bragging rights of having the CEO in your bed for a night? His words were like shards of glass, slicing me open. I took a shaky step towards him. No, God, no, Julian. It was never like that. Then what was it? His voice rose, sharp and demanding. What the hell was I to you? I felt the last of my defenses crumble. The truth, the one I had buried for years, clawed its way out of my throat before I could stop it. You were everything, I choked out. The words hung in the cold night air between us, raw, trembling, and irreversible. Julian's expression faltered, just for a second. The mask of anger and bitterness slipped, revealing a flash of stunned vulnerability. Then he scoffed, a harsh, disbelieving sound. Pathetic. Maybe, I whispered, the word tasting like defeat. But it was the truth. I knew you would never see me the way I saw you. I knew there could never be an us. But I was selfish. I just wanted one night. One single memory to hold on to. I never ever imagined that it would give me them. His jaw tightened, the muscle flexing. And you kept them from me. I wanted to tell you, I said, my voice thick with desperation. After the accident, I came to the hospital, but you pushed everyone away. You didn't want anyone near you. I was terrified. I was selfish, I know. But I swear, Julian, I never wanted to cause you more pain. The rooftop was silent again. The only sound, the distant hum of the city. Then Julian said something that shattered my heart into a million pieces. They looked at me like I was a person. His voice was quieter now, broken, like I wasn't this useless thing in a chair. He trailed off, his gaze dropping to his own legs. A wave of empathy so powerful it buckled my knees, washed over me. Without thinking, I knelt in front of his chair, forcing him to meet my eyes. You are not useless, I said, my voice fierce. Don't you ever think that. You are still Julian Kong. You are still the man who, my voice caught, thick with unshed tears. The man I've never been able to stop caring about. The space between us crackled with unspoken electricity. His eyes bored into mine, so close, so unbearably close that I could feel the warmth of his breath on my skin. For a dizzying second, I thought he might lean in, that he might close the infinitesimal gap between us. But he pulled back, his expression hardening once more into a mask of stone. Don't. I froze. Don't say things you don't mean, he growled, his voice a low. Don't give me a hope that doesn't exist. My heart ached with the weight of his words. But deep down, in the part of me that had loved him for years, I knew I meant every single syllable. And maybe, just maybe, he knew it too. The days that followed were an exercise in controlled chaos. Julian began showing up at my apartment, his uninvited presence justified by the unassailable excuse of a father's rights. The quadruplets were ecstatic. Minjun immediately conscripted him as the permanent patient in their ongoing game of hospital. Kai forced him to taste my admittedly terrible pancakes and howled with laughter at his pained grimace. Hannah claimed his lap as her personal throne, from which she issued a series of royal decrees. And Hyun, my sweet, shy Hyun, would simply lean against the arm of his wheelchair. A quiet, constant presence, as if he had been waiting his entire life for this man to arrive. I watched it all unfold from the sidelines. I watched him with them and I watched him with me, and I was struck by a terrifying realization. The more time he spent in our world, the more I felt the old, familiar tendrils of love wrapping around my heart, tighter and more dangerous than ever before. This wasn't the ghost of a one-night stand anymore. This was a daily barrage of shared glances, unspoken words, and moments so fragile and potent they felt like they could break me in two if he ever decided to leave us again. I had thought the hardest part was over, that his discovery was the peak of the mountain. I was so wrong. The hardest part was just beginning. It was letting him in,